everyone, just a quick editing note. The FatDoctorUK apparently identifies as non-binary. I did not realize this when I recorded the last part or the part that you are about to watch. I referred to the FatDoctorUK as she, her. It is not meant to be disrespectful to their gender identity. This was a case of ignorance, and given that this video raw footage, I believe, starts out at like an hour and 20 minutes. I'm not gonna go back and re-record it. I apologize for misgendering. It was not intentional. And I just wanted to put this right up front so everyone knows. Starting the next video, I will refer to them as either they, them, or he, him, since both of those pronouns are listed. But I just wanted that out there. Thank you. And I want to thank Julie in particular for bringing this to my attention. If someone else has mentioned it, thank you as well. This was the one comment that brought my attention to it, so I decided to add this little edit here. So thank you, and let's go ahead and get into the video. Hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 in the year of the TikTok of FatDoctorUK. So right now this video is from September 7th of last year of 2021. And we're just going to go ahead and start. Something I'm going to do slightly different than I did in the last video is, the last video I included all of the TikToks because I was going back and forth on it because I'm like, do I want to show everything even if I'm not commenting on it? And I've kind of decided that I am just going to cut those parts out. If I'm not responding to it, then I'm just going to cut it out. The only exception would be if I've commented like partway through a TikTok and I finish the TikTok and I have nothing more to say, I'll leave the rest of that TikTok in only because I want to give full context. But for full TikToks that I don't respond to at all, I'm just going to cut them out. Because even though it's a year in the TikTok, this is also primarily a commentary video. And it just also helps with claims of copyright and stuff, because it's like, no, I responded to everyone. If I don't respond to everyone, then it is kind of like I just took that video for no reason. So that just going forward, that's what I'm doing. But anyway, let's go ahead and start this.
Enough with this post-lockdown weight loss bullshit. We have all spent the last 18 months going through an extreme period of stress. Stress makes you gain weight.
Okay, so first thing I want to respond to, because I've seen the beginning of this particular one. I watched just this first video before I recorded. And I love that she says stress makes you gain weight, but it doesn't. Simply elevated cortisol levels don't make you gain weight. Again, I feel like she's being purposely misleading here. Stress, though, can cause differences in behavior, which can facilitate weight gain. Let's say you're very stressed out and you have a lot that you're doing, so you're working, and you don't get as much physical activity as you normally would because you're so stressed out that you're not taking those steps to take care of yourself. That can lead to weight gain. Let's say you're so stressed out that you have been stress eating and you're mindlessly eating more fatty foods, more sugary foods and stuff. That can also make you gain weight. So I think that this effort to lose weight that you gained during lockdown is meant to reestablish healthy habits, to reestablish normalcy, given that everyone was under an extreme amount of stress, by reevaluating those behaviors and getting back onto a healthy behavioral track, including eating habits, including exercising habits, has a net benefit overall. And so I think this kind of, let's not worry about post-lockdown weight loss and we've been under stress and stress makes you gain weight, is just a complete disingenuous take. I feel, especially coming from a doctor, it's a disingenuous take that seems to do nothing but further this narrative, which just kind of pisses me off. And it feels purposely misleading because it perpetuates that idea that you can't control your weight, which I think is the point. That if you've experienced stress, you're going to gain weight, and therefore it's not your fault. When in reality, the stress causes emotional and behavioral changes, which can lead to weight loss, or not weight loss, weight gain. And that's where stress comes into play here. So for someone that's always like, there's a difference between causation and association, you sure as hell aren't willing to look at the lurking variables here.
Leave your bodies alone and they will eventually settle back into their set point weight. Or alternatively, you could go and pay someone to help you to lose weight. Studies show that any weight you lose, you will regain within the next 5 years. Furthermore, studies show that 2/3 of you who try and lose weight post-lockdown are going to end up heavier within the next 5 years.
This just feels almost like fear-mongering of don't even try to do better for yourself. God forbid you try to do better for yourself because you're just going to gain weight. This feels like fear-mongering. It feels like it's purposely, and she's not the only one to make this argument. The more I hear it, the angrier I get because it seems purposefully to discourage people from taking steps to better their health through saying, well, if you do it, you're just going to gain weight back. You're going to gain all the weight back. It's like heading towards weight loss is hard. Working towards weight loss is hard. Staying on track is hard. And so to just put this very negative spin on it so that way people don't even try feels like it's an argument tactic to keep people in a heavier space so that way you don't feel insecure about not wanting to try.
It is a complete, utter waste of time. And furthermore, only reason you keep hearing about the importance of losing weight post-lockdown is because people are trying to make money out of you. Enough.
So the thing about people trying to make money off you, to a degree she's correct. But newsflash, people are trying to make money off you in all sorts of ways. Yes, weight loss, there's tons of gadgets. I like my Fitbit. But that someone's trying, the push of 10,000 steps a day would definitely influence the sale of Fitbits and that sort of thing. Not denying that. But then you also have, if you're going to go in this, you can also, there's plenty of ad campaigns and stuff like you've been through a lot, so treat yourself, and it's ice cream. So it goes both ways. You've been through lockdown and it's been very stressful for you. It's taken a hit to your finances. Use our bank. It's like, let's not pretend that capitalism only happens for the weight loss industry. All right, people are marketing and shit to you that you don't necessarily need for a variety of avenues in life, including the weight gain industry.
Look, I get it. It is very difficult to listen to the message that I'm sharing. It goes against everything you've been taught for most of your life. We call this cognitive dissonance. Basically what that means is you hear something that is so completely and utterly foreign to you that you absolutely refuse to accept it.
I don't think that's what cognitive dissonance, like that's the actual definition of cognitive dissonance. So the actual definition of cognitive dissonance is the state of having inconsistent thoughts, beliefs, or attitudes, especially related to behavioral decisions and attitude changes. So this whole thing of her putting forth this cognitive dissonance and this person who is outright saying, no, you shouldn't be telling people to be fat. That's not my experience. This isn't cognitive dissonance simply because they won't accept your viewpoint. And I think that saying that that's cognitive dissonance is almost gaslighty in a way. But there's this, and unfortunately I have this organized again in ways that you cannot see everything. Alright, I can't change this without completely stopping the recording and restarting it, and then I have to do it again to go back to the fat doctor, so okay, so for cognitive dissonance, there's this flow chart. If you look up cognitive dissonance definition and go to images, it's the first one there, and it says, an example of cognitive dissonance is smoking cigarettes is unhealthy, but you smoke cigarettes anyway. So the solution for this cognitive dissonance of knowing something is unhealthy but doing it anyway would be to either change the action, that smoking cigarettes is unhealthy, therefore you don't smoke cigarettes anymore, or change your belief. The research on smoking is not conclusive, therefore I continue to smoke cigarettes. So if anything, the fat acceptance movement experiences more cognitive dissonance because rather than what they're doing is changing their belief to be more consistent with their actions. So chances are, it's not that there's inconclusive evidence on obesity leading to these health issues, it's that they're saying that to justify the fact that they don't want to take any more further actions on their weight, because otherwise they have to confront that their actions lead to an undesirable outcome, which is counterintuitive to what most human beings try to do, and probably is counterintuitive to that primal part of their brain that's seeking to survive. So her saying that this person is experiencing cognitive dissonance is, I mean, I guess you could skew it that way, but right now you're presenting something as fact when it's disproven. They are rejecting the fact. It's not that it's cognitive dissonance, it's that they're saying that you're lying, basically. So it's not cognitive dissonance, because they reject the fact wholesale. It's not that they accept the fact, but then continue to do something counterproductive to that fact. It is that they reject the fact wholesale to begin with, meaning that cognitive dissonance doesn't even begin.
Against your core beliefs about yourself and about others. So for some people who are living in a larger body, they have been told their whole life that there is something wrong with them and that it's not okay to be fat. So when a doctor comes along and says it is okay to be fat, they freak out. Oftentimes they...
Okay, but you are treating yourself as an entity of validation of viewpoints or validations of facts, when what you are spewing, just because you're a doctor, there are many people with advanced degrees that produce studies that contradict what you're saying, meaning that we have choices. So are we going to believe this person that regularly doesn't cite their sources and that just says, I'm a doctor, as though the appeal to authority, their authority, which is a logical fallacy, is what validates all her arguments? Or are we going to take a look at the actual studies? Cognitive dissonance isn't happening here. We just think you're dumb.
I get the most angry because it's not a comfortable message to listen to. And that's okay. I'm used to that. Cognitive dissonance is occupational hazard for me. But if you look closely, you'll find that many experts agree with the things that I'm telling you. I'm not just the only one.
And yet you cite nothing. Granted, this may have been on that website that has now been deleted, but the fact that it is no longer available, meaning that her sources, and this is just barely a year later. So your arguments don't hold up, especially since you haven't posted. If anything, it seems like maybe you've realized the bullshit that you were spewing.
Here's the thing. I have spent hours creating videos, creating content for my Instagram page, my Facebook page, and on Twitter. I created a website that addresses this very topic using my own money and in my own spare time. This isn't my day job.
I don't understand the point of pointing that out. I've put together a website with all this information using my own money and my own spare time. Welcome to fucking personal projects on the internet. I make this YouTube video with microphone and a laptop I bought with my own money, and I do this in my own spare time. It's not something I do. So, like, what the fuck what difference does that make? I don't really understand that. I don't understand how that is at all addressing this, other than saying that you have evidence on your website, which a year later isn't even fucking there.
I don't get paid to do this work. I do it because I believe in this cause. I believe.
That's why most people do shit for free. Because they believe it. I don't do this for, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's nice to make a little bit of money from this YouTube channel, but one, I certainly don't make enough to live on by any means, by any stretch of the imagination. And I do this because I believe in the cause, because I'm seeing this as fucking bullshit and I feel the need to call it out. I don't understand why that has anything to do with this, other than the fact that you're trying to say that you're a doctor, and by doing this in your own free time and you believing this, that somehow legitimizes that point of view, which it doesn't.
In this message, I want people to know that they have been lied to for their whole entire lives. And I have...
So do the flat earthers. That doesn't make a goddamn bit of difference. It doesn't make them any less wrong.
The evidence to prove it. It's on the FAQ section of my website.
Which is no longer available. What am I supposed to fucking do?
But then so-and-so, who has absolutely no idea what they're talking about, comes onto my videos and says being fat is unhealthy. Period. Can you at least read all of the evidence that I have spent hours...
Can you read all the evidence that someone else has spent hours collecting on how obesity facilitates negative health outcomes? How about the other way? It works the other way around.
Hours putting together instead of just deciding that I'm wrong before giving me a chance.
Didn't you decide that people are wrong before giving them a chance? People say, that's not my experience, and you're like, well, that's reality, so, and just letting you know, and then you'll just put out these claims. You don't back them up with anything. So you have people watching your TikToks is giving you a chance. If you have all of this research to back you up, why don't you cite it in your TikToks when you're making your claims? Why don't you give links to the specific part that you're referring to? So that way people can evaluate for them for yourself in context. By just giving people, hey, here's my website, go to the FAQ section, someone else is having to go through several steps just to see the legitimacy of your point, which... So you're basically asking, again, this is another part of logical fallacy, of someone to do the research to validate your claim instead of just citing your sources to begin with. Just pointing to the FAQs of your website, which isn't even available to us now, but let's pretend that it was before, because it likely was. But let's say that it's there before, and you're like, just look at the FAQs on my website. You're asking us to go and read through the research that you're referencing rather than just referencing the study itself, because if you have all this list of different studies, they probably each look at different aspects of the obesity paradigm that you're talking about. So just asking us to look at the FAQs and kind of sort through all of that ourselves is basically asking us to do research to support your claim.
So I have come under quite a bit of criticism for not citing my sources in my videos. People keep saying that I'm trying to sell them something by signposting them to my website. You can't buy anything on my website. In fact, I am spending money every month maintaining my website without getting anything in return. I do this because I believe in the message and I want people to be able to access the evidence and the resources and the links that I share in my videos. So if you go to the FAQ section on my website, it looks a bit like this. See? Click on a question, it gives you more context, it gives you more nuance, and you're able to click on any of the links and go straight to the research paper.
Okay, but do you understand? So you're offering these specific questions, though, that may not be what the person is asking of you or part of your claim in a video. And even if it is, did you see how many questions were on there? I don't want to go through all of those. Like, that's asking, this is, again, she's like, but I do cite my sources on my website. Okay, but this is part of argumentation. It is not my job to validate your argument by going and sifting through all of this shit to find the nuance and to find the point that is supported by this evidence. It is your job to cite this, at the very least, the study, but a better form of citation for this would not only be to cite the study, but also cite the page number. So that way someone who's looking at your specific evidence can go and find it immediately and see what you were talking about. We can read that portion without having to sift through all this shit. It requires the reason why she doesn't do this is because it requires extra work on her part, and it becomes easier for people to invalidate her argument if they can see the evidence that she supports and find issues with the evidence. But by having to go through all of this, she can easily say, well, that wasn't what I was referring to. Well, how the fuck are we supposed to know?
This is how I choose to do things. It's my choice, right? If you don't want to take the time to go to my website and read the stuff, then that's totally up to you. But equally, you don't get to demand that I do things the way you want me to do them.
It's not that we're demanding, so we can totally still criticize you for not citing sources because you just put the link to your fucking website. We can still criticize you for that. We can't make you do things a certain way. You're right, we can't make you cite sources. We can't make you cite things in a way that is more conducive to a debate. We can't make you do that. But at the same time, you can't stop us from criticizing you for your poor citation efforts.
Because, you're not the boss of me.
What the fuck kind of argument is that? Are you 5?
Even if you disregard all the evidence that shows that your weight is predominantly determined by genetics, even if you think that being fat is a choice and it's all our fault that we've gained weight, even if you choose to ignore all the other factors that are implicated in weight gain. Even if you don't care that many people who have gained a significant amount of weight were raped or sexually assaulted in their childhood. Even if none of these things are important to you, that doesn't give you the right to treat fat people badly. It doesn't.
I agree. You don't have the right to treat fat people badly just because you don't like the way they look or you don't like that they're fat. I agree with that. I think it's a little bit disingenuous to, one, say that we're ignoring evidence when, at least at this point, we can't even see the evidence you're referencing. Number one. Number two, it's been demonstrated by you yourself that people have to go through a series of hoops in order to see the evidence that you are citing, which isn't conducive to debate and seems like you're trying to obfuscate your evidence because it's not very strong. Number two. Number three, that thing about, childhood abuse and rape survivors gaining weight, that is definitely a demographic of fat people. We see it a lot on My 600-Pound Life, where a lot of these people's weight gain and weight issues stem from unresolved trauma. But I don't understand how their trauma, yes, it's their trauma, they need help working through it, and that can be the cause, indirectly so, of their weight gain because of this unresolved trauma. At that point, they need therapy. They need therapy to help with this, and then they can work on losing weight. That doesn't legitimize their obesity. It just gives an explanation for it. And it gives an explanation of how their weight might be a security blanket, and there's more psychological factors at play. And they definitely need more patience and kindness than someone who is just lazy and eating. But that doesn't, I don't see how that, just is, they have trauma, therefore being 300 pounds is good for them. I don't understand that leap in logic at all.
Give you the right to troll us, to bully us, to shout things out of your car window. It doesn't give you the right to stop us in the streets and give us dietary advice.
I agree with this. I have no problem with this.
It doesn't give you the right to judge us based on our appearance or make fun of us or turn us into the punchline of a joke.
I agree that you shouldn't make fun of fat people. I do think that I can still judge you, though, especially if your behavior in public kind of suggests how you got to the weight that you are. I'm just saying. I was in university, I was in a class with someone who had a friend with them, and both of them were heavier than me, and the guy was saying, "Oh, I'm hungry again." And I hate that I'm hungry again. And she goes, "Well, of course you're hungry. You only had a muffin." And he goes, "It was a Costco muffin, though." And she goes, "Yeah, Costco muffins are small. Have you had a Costco muffin? I've had a Costco muffin. That thing will keep me full for fucking hours. It's over 600 calories, and it's full of fat. Now, don't get me wrong. It's also very carb heavy, and I could see how you could burn through it fairly quickly, but this guy had only eaten it an hour ago. So if you're saying a Costco muffin is small and that's why you're hungry, and not that, well, you had a Costco muffin and it's just full of carbs and that's why you're hungry, that I could see. But saying that it's because they're small, to me, suggests that you eat severely large portions, and that's why you are the way you are. Now, I don't even think about this much when I was in the moment, because quite frankly, I was more concerned with my studies. But looking back on it, it's well, no wonder you were heavier. So, yes, by looking at you, and especially in conjunction with behavior that we see of you in public, we can absolutely make certain judgments on what your eating habits and fitness level is like. It doesn't mean we have the right to harass you. I completely agree with that. We don't have the right to harass you. You shouldn't harass fat people in public or at all, quite frankly. But we can judge all we want. Saying that we shouldn't judge, and criticizing us for judging is basically criticizing us for a thought crime.
Judging someone based solely on appearance is discrimination, and that is wrong any way you slice it.
Please, you're telling me you've never judged someone that is clearly strung out because of their appearance, because you can see that they are strung out on drugs and not doing well, and you're telling me that you haven't made a judgment about them of, for me, it's, they're clearly high, I need to give a wide distance, because they are, from their looks, they could be acting more erratically. Judgments are made all the time sometimes without even conscious thought, you are responsible for it as well. You do it too.
Doctors have a responsibility to their patients. Beneficence, non-maleficence, autonomy, practicing fairly and without discrimination. Beneficence means doing what is in the best interest of your patient. Non-maleficence means doing no harm. Autonomy means that everyone has control of their own body and gets to decide what to do with it. Treating patients fairly and without discrimination is pretty self-explanatory. When a doctor chooses to ignore their patient's symptoms and blames it on their weight, refuses to examine or investigate their patient because of their weight, treats their patient differently than they would a thin patient with the same symptoms, mocks, ridicules or abuses their patient in any way, they are in breach of their code of conduct. This isn't about mollycoddling patients. This is
Okay, but in that same vein, if you refuse to talk with a patient that's super morbidly obese about losing weight, aren't you also demonstrating a level of negligence because it has such an impact on their health? Aren't you also guilty of negligence as a doctor and, in a way, putting harm on a patient by not making them aware of this? I'm just curious. And this idea that doctors providing different forms of treatment for fat patients over thin patients as though that's just inherently wrong is also very stupid, because we can't both say that everybody is different and then also tell doctors to give the same treatment for everyone. Do you see how that doesn't work? Do you see the cognitive dissonance in that statement? I think it kind of depends on the symptoms that the patient is presenting. If it's stuff that is primarily musculoskeletal, unlikely to result in a serious disease, then I think that just saying, you need to work on losing weight is enough. I think if it's something more internal and, for example, like extremely heavy periods that the patient is clearly distressed about, I don't think it hurts to also, and I think it's probably better to just give a brief series of tests for like the next 3 things that it could be outside of weight. Test for endometriosis, test for PCOS, test for like uterine cancer. Test for those 3 things. If they all come back negative, then just keep with the initial treatment of the patient should lose weight. And that's the one that you should give when they leave the doctor's offices. First, work on losing weight. In the meantime, we're testing you for this. If any of those come back positive, you bring them back, you discuss ways to modify that treatment, which could still include losing weight. It just might include other things as well.
It's about the law. So is dieting bad for you? Rather than giving you a yes or no answer, I'm going to let you decide. In this 3-part video, I'm going to present the pros and cons of dieting and then ask whether there is an alternative to going on a diet. To begin with, we need to define dieting. So when I talk about dieting, I'm talking about pursuing intentional weight loss. And that could be by restricting your calorie intake. It could be by restricting certain foods from your diet. It could be in any number of ways. The whole point is that you're pursuing weight loss. So in this first video, let's think about why that might be a good thing. First of all, we know for a fact that being in a larger body is associated with a number of illnesses. Diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, cancers, all sorts of things. There have been many links between being fat and having an illness. So it would make sense to assume that losing weight would prevent you from getting that illness. Unfortunately, there isn't that much evidence to support this. Take diabetes, for example. We know that if you go on a diet, your blood sugars will come down, no question. Some people are even able to temporarily reverse their diabetes or place themselves into remission. However, in the long term, the diabetes tends to come back. So whilst theoretically dieting should help reduce your risk of illness, there's actually not much evidence that it does in the long term. There are some people that claim that going on a diet, even if you're unsuccessful and gain back the weight, can actually improve your health. Now, there aren't that many studies to support this. There was one done in 2020, but unfortunately the evidence was really poor quality, and whilst it raised a lot of questions, it didn't give us any answers.
Okay, so I love that when she is saying something against evidence, she'll cite the evidence that she's refuting. But one, I would like her to explain why she considers the evidence poor quality. I'd like to know that. She doesn't explain that. She might explain it here in a moment, so we'll table that. But then for anything in favor of what she's saying, when she's already shown that she can at least cite the research on the screen, but instead she puts it here as for further information and links to some relevant studies, please see the FAQ section of my website. So that is how she's citing it. Again, we don't have access to the website. But that is how she's citing things in favor of her position, which just seems the fact that she is citing information that she is refuting, but won't cite evidence in favor of her point. To me, even more suggests that she knows that she is arguing in bad faith and that her evidence isn't that strong, and so she makes it a scavenger hunt for those that disagree with her in order to point out issues with her information. She's making it purposely more difficult because she knows that it's not strong evidence. And then she says that the evidence that is against her position is poor quality, but so far hasn't explained that.
But what if you just want to be smaller?
Oh, so she's not going to explain it at all. So what made that evidence poor is what I want to know. What makes that evidence poor? In your opinion, what made that study poor quality? I want to know.
That's completely understandable. There's no question that people are going to treat you better if you're in a smaller body. You're more likely to get a job. You're more likely to get paid more. You're more likely to
Cite your evidence! Cite your evidence! Because this is fucking bullshit. I'm actually really irritated. This is fucking bullshit because you have shown you know how to cite something in your video, and yet anything that is in favor of you do not cite it, which is just fucking bullshit. To me, it just suggests that you are purposefully trying to dance around your lack of evidence.
get a promotion. You're more likely to fit in at work. At school or in higher education, you're more likely to succeed. You're more likely to get an A on a paper if you're in a smaller body. You will be
Fucking where? Fucking where?
Be treated very differently by healthcare professionals. They are far less likely to dismiss your symptoms, far more likely to take you seriously, far more likely to examine you, to investigate you, and to treat you better than if you were in a larger body. Even judges who are not supposed to be biased in any way are more likely to give you a lighter sentence if you're in a smaller body. So there's no questions that there are multiple benefits to dieting, especially when it comes to how you're treated by others. In part 2, I'm going to be talking about the risks and disadvantages of dieting. Join me.
Are you gonna cite shit? My guess is no.
So in part 2, we're going to be discussing the risks and disadvantages of dieting. Remember that I'm defining dieting as the intentional pursuit of weight loss, however you choose to go about doing that. It could be restricting what you eat. It could be increasing your activity levels. The point is that you're doing it with the intention of losing weight as opposed to improving your physical health.
I don't understand why that is such a point of contention for the fat activist. So what if I'm doing it for aesthetic reasons? That's my fucking right. It's my goddamn body. Why, if you guys don't want to be policed for how you look and stuff, then stop fucking policing others. This is fucking bullshit. Like, if you're like, I'm healthy and I'm beautiful the way I am, fine, whatever. I'm not gonna comment on that. I don't really fucking care. But then what I get so fucking irritated over is that it's like, well, you're just losing it for aesthetic reasons. And they always talk about morality and stuff, and yet you are putting morality on my reason to lose weight. If I'm simply doing it to look good, but then I also have the net benefit of a better, healthier body, then what fucking difference does it make? It just feels like they're trying, clearly they are of the philosophical thought that intention matters more than the result. And there's this, I'm going to just go on a tangent real quick about this one philosophical question that I had with my coworkers a few years ago. And it was we were talking about how you place whether something is morally good or not. So let's say someone is breaking into a house in order to rob them. They break in, they see a body on the floor, and they nope the fuck out of there. But by breaking the window, it allowed fresh air to come in, because what that person was actually suffering from was carbon monoxide poisoning. So by allowing more air in, they actually saved that person's life. So, was them breaking in a morally good or bad decision? Now, where you fall on this will kind of determine whether you place more morality in the intention or in the result. And I feel like the fat activists, and for me personally, and I think with a lot of people, it tends to be somewhere in the middle. Yes, them breaking in was a morally bad action, but the result was morally good. Therefore, the whole entire circumstance was a net benefit. And I kind of leave morality out of that part, just saying that it was ultimately a benefit. And it's not that what they did was morally good, but to a certain extent, I kind of feel like they shouldn't necessarily be pursued. But at the same time, they were trying to break in for nefarious means. But perhaps this experience of seeing a body on the floor might discourage them from breaking in again, and that was enough. Anyway, so this over-focus on intention when the result of working out would be a net benefit health-wise, I don't understand why it's of your concern then. And even if it wasn't, what concern is it of yours? Alright, so in a quick interest of full disclosure, I had to leave this recording for a couple of hours to take care of some house stuff, but I'm coming back to it now. So I'm not in the same, full-on continual thought process that I was before, but I should be able to jump back into it fairly quickly. So let's just go ahead and finish this up.
Some of you might be asking why I'm making this distinction. When we intentionally pursue weight loss, then the marker of success is that we've lost weight. When we intentionally pursue health, then the marker of success is that our health improves. And weight loss does not necessarily equal good health. Pursuing weight loss can have a profound impact on your mental health. Low self-esteem, feelings of unworthiness, feeling like a failure, all of these take a huge toll on your mental health over time.
Okay, but why does it have to be either or? So I took up running, one, to help with my weight loss. That was kind of the first thing, was I wanted it to help with my weight loss. But as I've been running, and as I've been able to run further, my legs have gotten stronger. I have a naturally more athletic sister. She can, never run. Never. She can be sedentary and not do anything, and typically what happens is, if we're like, okay, let's go for a run, she can outrun me, she can go for longer, even if she doesn't do any of the exercise that I do, her body has been naturally more tolerant of especially high impact exercises than mine is. I have a variety of issues with joints, and so I am a little bit more injury prone than she is. But, and here, I gotta be honest, I took a lot of pride in this because my sister's very naturally athletic. Well, at one point we were walking, and I found that because I'd been running so much and my legs were so much stronger, I was able to just naturally walk faster than she was. First time ever. And I found that I was having to moderate myself to walk slower, to walk beside her. And when we were just kind of walking, I just kind of naturally pulled ahead of her. And it was a really good feeling to see this person that I typically see as someone who's she does a lot more in terms of not eating. In terms of diet, she has me beat. She doesn't eat nearly as much as I do, and I've been working on that. I don't know what it is about the athletics, other than she's just a little bit younger, and this is one thing where it's like, no, there are some people that are a little bit more naturally athletic than others. Doesn't mean you can't have health. Doesn't mean that you can't train yourself past their natural level. It was really interesting to see like the amount of muscle that had built in my legs that I was just able to walk faster naturally. So that was really fun. So I don't think that there's any issue necessarily with starting with the purpose of losing weight loss and using weight loss as one of the metrics of success. But that doesn't mean that has to be the only metric of success. Even if you're solely pursuing weight loss, that doesn't have to be the only metric of success. You take measurements around all, like your stomach, your arms, your legs, and then you can also include things like, do I see more definition here? How are my clothes fitting? And incorporating, I don't think it's even bad for those that are strictly pursuing weight loss to also take in some health markers. Can I run faster? Can I breathe easier? Can I, like, that can come after the initial pursuit of weight loss, because I think that helps with sustainability. I think it helps with sustainability actually to just in general have multiple markers of success. So let's say you start out with strictly health and let's say you want to work on getting faster, but you're stagnating. Well, let's take a look at some of the other metrics of success to just kind of help keep your motivation up. Have you lost weight? Has like parts of your body become more toned? How do your clothes fit? Do they fit better? Like those sort of things. There's nothing wrong with doing a both situation. I really hate this perspective that we see from fat acceptance people that it has to be either or.
Then there are the physical symptoms of dieting. In most cases, you're getting less nutrition than you normally would. And as a result, you'll find things like fatigue, hair loss.
Okay, fatigue can happen when you're doing something that is completely foreign to you. When I, like, this was many, many years ago when I was a teenager and I first went for dieting and exercise. If you're not used to exercise, especially, it's going to tire you the fuck out at first. It will. Even when I first took up running, I was fucking exhausted after each run. Now it's gotten to the point where like I take 20 minutes to kind of rest and recuperate and I'm back up and I'm good. But when it first started, I would be down for the rest of the day because I was fucking exhausted. That's just kind of a natural process of your body kind of acclimating. Hair loss has to be like an extreme level of dieting. Cutting your diet down by a few hundred calories a day isn't gonna harm you. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're taking in less nutrition if you're swapping out foods like donuts and pastries and candy for fruits and vegetables. So there is that going on. That being said, I still think that if you are cutting your calories so much that you're experiencing hair loss, you're probably going to a too far extreme level. And there is such a thing as consulting your fucking doctor. Why is that like not part of this equation? Why can't I, like with weight loss and stuff, talk with someone so that way I'm doing it safely? Like, why is that such an issue?
Changes in your skin and your nails, and reduced cognition. In other words, you're more forgetful, you find it harder to concentrate. These are all common side effects of.
Okay, but changes in skin, nails, fatigue levels, and memory and stuff can also be equated with stress. And she just said in a previous TikTok that we've all been dealing with massive levels of stress. So if someone's taking on weight loss, how do we know that those symptoms that they're experiencing aren't from stress levels, and maybe that, maybe the exercise and the improved diet and stuff isn't helping them?
Going on a diet, and they're very unpleasant. They don't tend to go away with time either. More long-term, there are concerns about disordered eating. Several studies have shown that repeated attempts at weight loss increase your risk of disordered eating. Now, disordered eating is actually one of the highest risks for developing quote-unquote obesity later on in life. Disordered eating is also a very high risk for developing eating disorders later on. Eating disorders are serious mental health conditions that have a very high mortality rate and should be avoided at all costs. Some studies have shown that people who lose a significant amount of weight and then manage to keep it off are actually displaying symptoms of an eating disorder. Another long-term concern about dieting is the concept of weight cycling. As many people will have experienced, the majority of people who try to lose weight tend to regain that weight within the next 5 years.
Okay, but again, we're not looking at, again, she's saying that people that have diet gain the weight back in the next 5 years and therefore are blaming the diet, which is fine. Because as we've talked about earlier, yes, correlation does not equal causation, but that also doesn't disprove that that could be a mitigating factor, that could be a partial cause. It doesn't disprove that. It's simply something to keep in mind when we are looking at this data set. So while going on a diet is correlated with gaining weight later, while that might be an mitigating factor in that does not prove causation. And what about adherence levels? That is always my question when they bring this up, when we talk about people gaining the weight back. What was the adherence level of these people that gained the weight back? Did they stop following the diet and then gain the weight back? Well, of course they did, because they're no longer adhering to the diet. So it's not the fucking diet's fault. It's because people couldn't maintain the adherence. And then sometimes that brings into the conversation, well, if people couldn't adhere to it, then it was a bad diet. Not necessarily. I don't think that someone's inability to adhere to a diet regimen is necessarily a signal that the diet itself was bad, but I do think that it means that the implementation was not well done. We can aim for this ideal diet of nothing but whole grains, lean meats, fruits, and vegetables. But to go from eating McDonald's 3 times a week, most of your other meals are either frozen or pre-prepared, and then trying to go straight to the fresh, lean meats, making everything yourself, cutting down on portion sizes, and doing all of that, it's going to be too sharp a turn for most people. So the trick is to pick one thing, keep at it for 3 months, and then start something else. It's a slow process. It is a slow process. When I was a kid, my meals were often of the hamburger helper variety. And then when I was about, God, I don't know, 8 or 9, my mother realized that wasn't very good for us. High in sodium, not good. She was going on her own weight loss journey and was didn't want to have to cook 2 meals, and was like, it's not gonna hurt me or my sister to eat healthier. But she also understood that making us go straight from something that's kind of hamburger helper related to something that's very lean, very clean, isn't going to be a great receptor for the kids. So it was about changing things slowly. Instead of the hamburger helper, we had lean chicken with mac and cheese. And it kind of developed from there until we were eating meals that primarily consisted of chicken, vegetables, and like brown rice, or sometimes we would have zoodles. And so it was a very slow process, though. From the time that we stopped eating hamburger helper when I was 8 to the time that we were eating chicken, veggies, and rice was about another 8 years. It was when I was 16 that we were like eating that type of food. So it's a gradual process. You have to take it slow. That's why people stop adhering to their diets, is because they try too fast to go from one end to another. So maybe instead of telling people, oh, they should adhere to this diet, you help them by picking one thing. One thing, stick with it consistently for a set amount of time, and then we'll bring in something else. So maybe start with stop drinking soda. It doesn't have to be as insanely hard as people make it out to be. It's about how you approach it.
And studies suggest that up to 2/3 of people end up heavier than when they first started. This weight loss, weight gain, weight loss, weight gain is known as yo-yo dieting or weight cycling. There are concerns that weight cycling is bad for your health. And whilst there simply isn't enough evidence yet, and the jury is still out, One theory is that weight cycling interferes with your basal metabolic rate and changes it forever. Join me in part 3 where we look for alternatives to diet.
Okay, but you just, unfortunately, this is actually not something based on how she presented that last bit of information, because she said that jury is still out, but one theory is. And then she chooses this one that admittedly sounds very catastrophic. It's going to change your basal metabolic rate forever. Now, that's just a presentation of a theory, but unfortunately, some people are going to not realize that this is a theory. It has not been proven. It has not gone through enough rigor in the medical community to be given validity. But most people aren't going to realize that and just take what she says. And because she's a doctor that's presenting this theory, they're gonna assume. It's one thing though that I'm not necessarily gonna place at her feet, because I think that she did the due diligence of saying nothing has been conclusive yet, but this is one theory.
So far, we've looked at the advantages to dieting, and whilst there aren't any proven long-term health benefits to dieting, we do know that it improves the way that people treat us in society. The disadvantages of dieting include physical side effects, poor mental health, disordered eating, which in turn...
Okay, but like she says that weight loss can lead to poor mental health and increases in insecurity and lower self-confidence and stuff, but when you do it right, it does the exact opposite of those. I'm far more confident in myself than I have ever been since I took up running and have been losing the weight. And yeah, sometimes I gain some weight back and I reflect on the choices that I've made over the past week, and it's about being accountable for the choices that you make. And that's the issue, is that a lot of people don't necessarily want to be responsible for the choices that they make. We see this in the fat acceptance movement to begin with. It's not my choices. This is just my genetics. Meanwhile, we're saying they're what I eat in the days and they eat like shit. I'm sorry, I have feelings about this.
Can lead to weight gain and or an eating disorder, and weight cycling, which many believe is an independent risk factor for poor health. So now we have to ask ourselves if there is an alternative to dieting. And of course there is. It's called intuitive eating. Now, I'm not an expert in intuitive eating, but I do know that there are over 180 studies that have demonstrated the benefits to intuitive eating. They include reducing your blood sugar levels, reducing your cholesterol, improving your blood pressure, and numerous other health benefits, which you can learn more about by visiting Evelyn Tribole's website, which I will link to this video. Intuitive eating is all about learning to listen to your body's internal cues. And for those of you who think that's a ridiculous idea because you'll just eat and eat and eat and eat and never stop eating, that's nonsense. Our bodies are perfectly capable of controlling how much we eat.
Okay, so here's the thing. I actually don't have a huge problem with the concept of intuitive eating, but it's done so wrong by so many. One, I think that your hunger cues... Well, one, I think intuitive eating can work when you eat cleanly and you're not eating a bunch of processed, highly palatable foods. Because those foods are designed to bypass your body's full cues. So it doesn't work for intuitive eating. Things like fast food, McDonald's, Kraft mac and cheese, those types of highly processed foods are meant to, one, that you won't get sick of eating them, and two, that it suppresses, I think it's ghrelin, I think is the hormone. And this can be even found in certain sodas, I believe. Don't quote me on that. But I think it can be found in certain sodas, and it's definitely helped me by cutting back on the processed foods I eat. I don't get hungry as often. I get full faster. So cutting down on some of those processed stuff does help. And in that way, I think intuitive eating can be done when everything that you eat is either stuff you make yourself or are whole foods. But I think that there's some issue around intuitive eating with that. But not only that, it's when they use intuitive eating as an excuse to gorge. And the issue with that is, and they say that, well, it's intuitive eating, so I'm supposed to, but there was this one person that said, I've eaten so many donuts or McDonald's or fast food or something. I remember it was fried. That's about it. It was something fried, and she would eat it and eat it and eat it to the point where she got sick. And she said, but I'm still craving it. So do I continue to eat it even though I'm also extremely full and feeling sick, but I still want more? And people encouraged her to eat more. It's like, but your body, if you are feeling so full to the point you're sick, that is your body's cue to stop fucking eating. If you are still like, oh, but I want more, that's the process that of the highly palatable food tricking your brain into eating more. If you're so full though that you are sick, that is your body telling you to stop fucking eating. So that is where intuitive eating doesn't work. It doesn't work with the type of food that we have, and it doesn't work with how people interpret intuitive eating. It does not work in that way. I'm not saying that it can't work. I do think that it can work under certain conditions, but by and large, how people use it doesn't work.
How? Through a complex process that involves hormones and neurotransmitters, and it's part of our body's internal systems, which we call homeostasis. The problem is that since you were a child, you were taught to ignore these internal cues.
That could be part of it, but let's be frank here. Food is not what it was even 100 years ago. It has changed a lot. It has been highly engineered, and it is meant to bypass these hormones and neurotransmitters that tell you to stop. They want you to eat more.
Finish what's on your plate. You can't have pudding until you've eaten your main course. You can't throw any food away. Or, alternatively, you can't eat this or you can't eat that. Even as toddlers.
I do think that I think that telling children that they have to finish everything on their plate is a bit of a mistake. And I think it does train us to not listen so much when we're like done, because there's still food on the plate, and there's this thing that was kind of ingrained in us from childhood to always clean your plate. And then there's this kind of feeling of food waste. If I don't eat it, it's going to go to waste. And so there's this kind of balancing act of, no, you don't want to encourage excessive amounts of food waste, but at the same time, you don't want to hurt yourself in the name of saving that food from being wasted. I think I will agree that I think that this, for a lot of people, is something that has to be kind of negotiated and worked through. I'm still struggle sometimes when I'm like, I'm full, but there's still food on my plate and I don't want to waste it. And I have to kind of remind myself, it's okay. You ate most of it. It's not like you're letting a huge amount of food go to waste. And if you're full, you're full. Just stop.
We lose our ability to control how much we eat and when we eat. And as a result, we lose the ability to listen to and obey our internal cues. In short, intuitive eating trains you to listen to those internal cues and to obey your body's natural desires.
I can see how that could happen when done correctly, but I've already gone over why there's some issues with intuitive eating. I think that the general premise is good, and I think training yourself to pay attention more when you're feeling full is good, but it has already been shown to be misinterpreted and misused in fat acceptance circles.
These cues have been keeping us alive for millennia. And you have to ask yourself why health professionals and the diet and wellness industry believe that they know more about your body than you do. But does intuitive eating help you to lose weight? And the answer is, it really depends. It does teach you how to ditch diet culture and how to learn to accept your body. It helps with your mental and emotional health and is a real alternative to dieting. So is dieting bad for you? That's up to you to decide. But I hope these videos have helped you make a more informed choice.
So, informed choice, while she only presented one perspective, she didn't really balance that a whole lot. She demonized dieting and promoted intuitive eating. So to say this was to make an informed choice is a little misleading. But I find it interesting that she doesn't come out and say directly dieting is, well, I guess she did in previous ones, but this is a very calm and procedural way to go through it, so I will give her that, especially since I'm pretty sure as we get closer, once she cuts her hair, I think she becomes significantly more aggressive and more black and white in her arguments and more commanding, I think, but we'll see. We'll see.
So someone asked me earlier on today on Twitter what I thought about obesity. That sounds like quite a general question, but they were asking whether I thought there was anything we can do about it or whether we just have to accept that it is what it is and there's nothing we can do about it. So here was my response in a nutshell. I do not believe that obesity is a medical condition. The term obesity literally means to be fat. And I think it's really important to understand the timeline of the medicalization of fatness, because we didn't always think it was a bad thing. This is a
I'm gonna let her get to that, but the thing with her saying that obesity is that you're fat, basically, I think that's, again, kind of being a little too black and white with its definition. You reach the level of obesity and it becomes a disease once your weight has crossed a certain threshold for health risks. That was my understanding of obesity. If I am wrong, please someone correct me. I have a hard time taking anything that she says at face value because it seems we've seen through several TikToks how it feels like she purposely omits information or twists information to suit her narrative. And she seems to be very focused on pushing the narrative of fat acceptance to the detriment of actually presenting well-researched information.
relatively recent issue. It started in the US and is based solely on society's hatred and fear of black people. If you haven't read it already, then Fearing the Black Body, the racial...
So I still need to watch this video, but apparently Sam at Every Size, who has a degree in history, goes through that book and kind of points out what's wrong with how the information is presented. I really need to watch that. That's on my list, I think, later this week to watch because I'm very curious. I've really been enjoying Sam at Every Size recently. But from what I understand, even how that information is presented in Fearing the Black Body is wrong. And even when I looked at just the very first chapter, and I would think that someone as educated as our Fat Doctor UK here would understand how that information, what that book started out, even as its premise, was an incomplete and very narrow scope premise using the Renaissance and the perspective of very kind of fluffy women as what was always seen as ideal, when that's not true if you go even further back towards ancient Greece, and even later than ancient Greece into early Christianity, where gluttony was a sin. Like, gluttony was one of the 7 deadly sins, and it wasn't viewed well. Even if we look at Dante's Inferno, there's a whole ring of hell devoted to people that overate, which was a reflection of perspectives, even at the time, given that it was a very political book. I don't know. I think that saying that there was a time when we viewed obesity as a good thing, like maybe partially, maybe like being heavier than we view as a healthy weight now might have been seen as a good thing, but I don't think being morbidly obese was ever seen as a good thing. I find that hard to believe.
Origins of Fat Phobia by Sabrina Strings is a great book to read. It explains why fat oppression is deeply rooted in racism.
I really hate this coupling of racism and the fat acceptance movement. I really don't like it. Oh, and I do want to clear up something about the morbid obesity, because I know that there's some cultures where girls are like ritually fattened in order to appeal to a husband. So I guess there is that. But that is different from health, although I think I framed it as a good thing. So we'll just kind of keep it into the health realm here. Because the world is wide, and I'm afraid of putting too much stock into my own experiences for this. So perhaps there was a point where morbid obesity was seen as something better, but that doesn't mean we've had so much progress in medicine and science since then that I don't think that looking to the past for validation is a good thing.
What happened was we as a society decided that fat was bad or abnormal. And in order to categorize people into normal and abnormal, fat and thin, bad and good, we came up with the modern day BMI. The BMI is simply a measure of the ratio of your height and your weight. That's it. That's all it is. But what happened is that over the next 40, 50 years, we began to use the BMI to categorize people into abnormal and normal. The irony is that many studies nowadays show that having a BMI between 25 and 30 is actually the healthiest in terms of life expectancy and in terms of morbidity. So it turns out that...
Okay, so let's just take that at face value for a moment. Even if having a BMI of 25 to 30 was seen as the healthiest, which I think that she's editorializing a little bit, and she's also not citing her sources with this, so there's no way to evaluate this claim. But let's pretend for a moment, we'll just take it at face value, that being in the 25 to 30 category is the healthiest. That is still only the overweight category. That is the overweight category. If you look at people in an overweight category, they look maybe just a little bit chubby, but they're not going to be like any of the fat acceptance people that we see. She would be, just from looking at her, you can tell she would be in the obese category, at least obese class 1, if not obese class 2. You can tell just from looking at her, and I'm not saying that to be cruel, and I'm not saying that to be mean-spirited. I'm just saying that even if you were to claim that a BMI of 25 to 30 was the healthiest range, then you would still need to lose weight to get into that category. Because that's only the overweight category. That doesn't even reach the obesity level. You wouldn't even be diagnosed with obesity at that level. Because it isn't until you reach past 30 that you go into obese categories. This isn't helping her point so far the way she thinks it is.
Abnormal is actually normal, but we didn't know that way back when we were making these decisions.
But it's not that abnormal. You're barely outside of the normal spectrum from between 25 and 30. It's when someone at like a BMI of 45 is trying to say that they're just as healthy as someone, even if they try to say they're just as healthy as someone at a BMI of 28, they're not. So it's not, this isn't making the claim that she thinks it is.
So over the last 50, 60 years, we have found that all sorts of conditions are associated with a higher BMI. But we've never been able to prove that a high BMI causes any of these conditions. Look, it's really important to understand that obesity is not a medical condition. It's a social construct, just like race.
So again, I feel like she's purposely leaving out information here. Like, the disease itself doesn't... I'm having a hard time verbalizing the issue that I have with this. So, yes, having a BMI is not shown to directly cause. However, it shows a significant elevated risk. So sometimes diagnoses are a matter of you are at an elevated risk. That's why we say pre-diabetic. They're not diabetic. Being pre-diabetes doesn't directly cause diabetes because you can get your A1C down, typically with diet and exercise, to get you out of the pre-diabetic state. But it is a marker of significant risk. It is a marker. That is what obesity is. Obesity is classed as a disease because it is important to look at it as a marker for significant health issues.
Like gender. And the thing is that society uses these constructs to oppress people. White people oppress black people. Cisgender people oppress transgender and non-binary people. Thin people oppress fat people. Now, I'm not for 1 second suggesting that the fat experience is the same as the black experience or the same as the trans experience, because of course it's not. But obesity is a social construct, not a medical condition. So if you ask me if I think there is a solution to the obesity crisis, the answer is yes. We simply need to do away with the social construct. Scrap obesity and BMI altogether and start again.
Okay. I wanted to let that finish playing out. I have thoughts that I can't verbalize right now because I simply do not have the energy to go into that. I'm sure she's going to say something like this again. For the record, from the time this video started till now, we've only gotten through 2 weeks of videos. 2 weeks. This is going to be an ongoing thing with her, but we're going to get through it. I'm definitely thinking, because this is a much longer project than I thought it would be, given who I'm starting out with, I might extend when I'm going to stop working on this channel until I get through the people that I really wanted to get through. But anyway, I'm going to leave it here. Thank you for watching. We'll continue this next week, and I will see you next time.